When a billion-dollar heir is humiliated in front of the world's elite, his fiancée declares she won't marry a broken man in a wheelchair. And the empire he built begins to crumble. But one woman sees what everyone else missed, a king who refuses to beg. What starts as a contract marriage to save his reputation becomes a dangerous game of loyalty, betrayal, and power. Because sometimes the person you underestimate is exactly the one who'll burn your world down to save you. Stay until the end to see how this unfolds, and drop a like and comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. The Whitmore Grand Ballroom had never looked more beautiful, and Ethan Calloway had never felt more exposed. Crystal chandeliers threw fractured light across marble floors, and the city's most powerful families stood in clusters, champagne flutes catching the glow like tiny weapons. Outside the floor-to-ceiling windows, the skyline glittered, a monument to ambition, to money that moved mountains and crushed anything softer than steel. Inside, the air hummed with expensive perfume, quiet laughter, and the kind of conversation that decided which companies lived and which ones died before sunrise. Ethan sat in his wheelchair near the center of the room, his jaw tight, his hands resting too carefully on the armrests. He'd positioned himself deliberately, not tucked into a corner like something to be pitied, not hidden behind his family's security detail. He was here, visible, because if he gave them even 1 inch of weakness, they'd take the whole damn empire. 6 months. That's how long it had been since the accident that shattered his spine and killed the man driving beside him, his closest friend, his head of security, the only person who'd seen the brake lines cut before it was too late. 6 months since Ethan Calloway went from untouchable to vulnerable, from the heir everyone feared to the man everyone watched, waiting for him to fall the rest of the way. Tonight was supposed to fix that. Tonight, Vanessa Hart, his fiancée of 3 years, daughter of the Hart Media dynasty, the woman whose family controlled half the news cycle in North America, was supposed to stand beside him and show the world that the Calloways were still a force to be reckoned with, that Ethan's injury didn't change a goddamn thing, except Vanessa was late, and Ethan could feel the room starting to shift. "Mr. Calloway?" A man approached. Lawrence Gaines, one of the investor vultures who'd been circling since the accident. His smile was all teeth. "Hell of a turnout. Your father must be pleased." Ethan met his eyes without flinching. He usually is when people show up on time. Gaines chuckled, glancing around. "Speaking of which, where's the lovely Miss Hart? I was hoping to congratulate you both." "She'll be here." Of course, of course." Gaines took a slow sip of his drink, letting the silence stretch just long enough to sting. "Though I have to say, Ethan, some of us have been wondering, given the recent changes, whether the merger with Hart Media is still moving forward. A lot of money on the table, a lot of questions." Ethan's fingers tightened on the armrest, but his voice stayed flat. "The merger's solid. You'll see the announcement next quarter." "Glad to hear it." Gaines smiled again, sharper this time. "Because if it falls through, well, your shareholders might start looking for alternatives. You understand." He walked away before Ethan could respond, and the message landed like a knife between the ribs. "They're already planning for your collapse." Ethan scanned the room, forcing himself to breathe evenly. His father, Richard Calloway, silver-haired and granite-faced, stood near the bar, surrounded by politicians and old money families who owed him favors spanning decades. He caught Ethan's eye across the crowd, and the look he gave his son was colder than the champagne. "Don't embarrass me tonight." Ethan looked away. Then the ballroom doors opened and Vanessa Hart stepped inside. She was stunning. She always was. Dark hair swept up, a crimson gown that clung in all the right places, diamonds at her throat that probably cost more than most people made in a year. Every head turned, cameras flashed, because of course there were cameras. Vanessa never went anywhere without making sure the world was watching. She walked toward Ethan, her heels clicking against marble, her expression unreadable. And something in Ethan's chest went cold. He knew that look. He'd seen it in boardrooms when someone was about to pull funding. He'd seen it in his father's eyes the day they told him he'd never walk again. Vanessa stopped 3 feet away from his wheelchair, close enough that everyone could see them, far enough that it felt like a chasm. "Ethan." Her voice was smooth, controlled, public. "Vanessa." He kept his tone even, but his pulse was hammering. "You're late." "I know." She glanced around the room, making sure every important pair of eyes was on her. Then she looked back at him, and there was no warmth in her gaze, no affection, just cold calculation. "I'm sorry, I needed time to think." Ethan's throat tightened. "About what?" She took a breath, slow, deliberate, like she was about to deliver a line she'd rehearsed. "About us. About this." She gestured vaguely toward him, toward the wheelchair, toward everything the accident had taken. "I can't do this anymore, Ethan." The room didn't go silent all at once. It was worse than that. Conversations died in ripples, spreading outward from where they stood, until the only sound was the faint clink of glassware and the hum of the city outside. Ethan stared at her. "What are you talking about?" Vanessa's jaw tightened, and for a second, just a second, he thought he saw something like regret flicker across her face. But then it was gone, replaced by the same steely composure she wore in front of cameras. "I'm talking about reality," she said, loud enough that the people nearest them could hear, loud enough that it would spread. "I signed on to marry a man who could lead an empire, Ethan, not someone who needs help getting through a doorway." The words hit him like a fist to the chest. Someone gasped. A woman near the bar put a hand to her mouth. Across the room, Richard Calloway's expression went from stone to volcanic. Ethan forced himself to breathe. "You don't mean that." "I do." Vanessa's voice didn't waver. "I've tried, Ethan. I really have. But I can't spend the rest of my life watching you struggle. I can't marry a broken man." The room exploded. Not literally, but close. Whispers erupted like wildfire. Phones came out. Reporters who'd been hovering near the edges started moving closer, vultures smelling blood. Ethan felt the walls closing in. His hands shook on the armrests, and he hated himself for it, hated that they could see it, hated that Vanessa was doing this here, in front of everyone, with cameras rolling and his enemies watching and his father's empire balanced on a knife's edge. "Vanessa," his voice cracked, and he hated that too. "Don't do this." She looked at him, and for the first time her mask slipped just enough for him to see what was underneath. Pity. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. Then louder, turning toward the crowd. "I can't marry him. The engagement is over." She pulled the ring off her finger, a flawless diamond that had belonged to his grandmother, and set it on the table beside him. Then she turned and walked toward the exit, her head high, her steps confident, like she'd just won something instead of destroying him. The room erupted. Investors closed in. Reporters shouted questions. Richard Calloway shoved through the crowd, his face twisted with fury. And Ethan knew that the second his father reached him, the lecture would be brutal, the blame would be absolute. And in the chaos, in the noise, and the flashing lights, in the feeling of his entire world cracking apart, Ethan Calloway made himself sit straighter. He didn't beg. He didn't chase her. He didn't break. He just sat there, in the center of the ballroom, surrounded by enemies, and swallowed the rage burning in his throat. Because if they saw him cry, if they saw him plead, if they saw him as anything less than a man who could still run an empire from a goddamn wheelchair, it was over. Claire Bennett stood near the back of the ballroom, holding a champagne flute she hadn't touched, and watched the entire thing fall apart. She wasn't supposed to be here. Not really. She was a translator, hired last minute because one of the Calloway family's international partners needed someone who could handle Mandarin, French, and legal jargon without breaking a sweat. She'd been standing in the background all night, doing her job, staying invisible. But she'd seen everything. She'd seen Vanessa Hart walk in like a queen. She'd seen Ethan Calloway's face change the second his fiancée stopped too far away. She'd seen the whole brutal public execution play out in front of a room full of people who would turn it into headlines by morning. And she'd seen something nobody else seemed to notice. Ethan hadn't begged. He should have. Most men would have. Most men, faced with that kind of humiliation, would have tried to salvage it, argued, pleaded, made promises. But Ethan Calloway had just sat there, shoulders squared, jaw tight, and let her walk away. Claire didn't know if that made him strong or stupid. But it sure as hell made him interesting. "Miss Bennett?" She turned, startled, and found herself looking at a man in his 50s. Expensive suit, sharp eyes, the kind of presence that said, "I make decisions that ruin lives before breakfast." "I'm Marcus Hale," he said, extending a hand. "Senior advisor to the Calloway family." Claire shook his hand carefully. "I know who you are, Mr. Hale." "Good. Then you'll understand when I say we have a problem." He glanced toward the center of the room, where Ethan was surrounded by reporters and investors, his expression locked down like a vault. "And we need someone to help fix it." Claire frowned. "I'm just a translator." "You're more than that." Hale's gaze was clinical, assessing. "You're smart, you're discreet, and you're not part of the circus. That makes you valuable." "Valuable how?" Hale leaned in slightly, lowering his voice. "How would you like to make a year's salary in 12 months, Miss Bennett? All you have to do is marry Ethan Calloway." Claire blinked. Then she laughed, short, startled, disbelieving. "You're joking." "I'm not." She stared at him, waiting for the punchline. It didn't come. "You want me to what exactly? Play pretend so the tabloids have something new to talk about?" "I want you to restore his image," Hale said bluntly. "Vanessa just made him look weak in front of every investor, competitor, and political enemy we have. If we don't fix this fast, the empire crumbles, shareholders pull out, rivals move in. The Calloway name becomes a punchline. And you think a fake marriage fixes that?" "I think the right marriage does." Hale's eyes narrowed. "Someone who's not a socialite. Someone who looks like she chose him, not his money. Someone the public can root for." Claire shook her head slowly. "You don't even know me." "I know enough." Hale pulled a slim folder from his jacket and handed it to her. "Claire Bennett, 28, Columbia graduate, dual degrees in linguistics and international relations. You've been working freelance for 3 years, barely keeping your head above water. Your father's a retired professor with medical bills piling up. You're one bad month away from losing everything." Claire's stomach dropped. "How do you—" "It's my job to know." Hale's expression didn't change. "You're drowning, Miss Bennett. I'm offering you a life raft." She wanted to throw the folder back at him. She wanted to walk out of the ballroom and never look back. But she couldn't. Because he was right. Her father's treatments were bleeding her dry. Her apartment rent was 2 months overdue. She'd been taking every job she could find, working 70-hour weeks, and it still wasn't enough. "What exactly are you offering?" she asked quietly. "A 1-year contract marriage," Hale said. "You live in the Calloway estate. You attend events. You present a united front. In return, you receive $500,000. Half up front, half at the end of the contract. All your father's medical expenses covered. A clean exit when it's over." Claire's pulse hammered. $500,000. That was everything. That was her father's surgeries. That was breathing room. That was a future that didn't involve drowning. "And if I say no?" Hale shrugged. "Then we find someone else. But you won't get another offer like this, Miss Bennett, and neither will your father." It wasn't quite a threat, but it was close enough. Claire looked across the ballroom toward the man still sitting in the center of the chaos. Ethan Calloway's face was unreadable, but his hands were clenched on the armrests, knuckles white. She thought about her father, in a hospital bed he couldn't afford. She thought about the stack of bills on her kitchen counter. She thought about what it felt like to work yourself to the bone and still come up short. And she thought about the way Ethan Calloway hadn't begged when the woman he loved walked away. "I have conditions," Claire said finally. Hale raised an eyebrow. "Go on." "I won't be treated like decoration. I speak my mind, and I keep my dignity. If I'm going to do this, I do it on my terms." For the first time that night, Hale smiled. "I think you'll fit in just fine, Miss Bennett." But 48 hours later, Claire Bennett stood outside the Calloway estate with a single suitcase and a contract she'd read 17 times. The house, mansion, loomed in front of her, all glass and stone and old money, surrounded by gates that probably cost more than her entire neighborhood. A security guard had already scanned her ID, checked her name off a list, and waved her through without a word. She felt like she was walking into a cage. The front door opened before she could knock, and Marcus Hale stepped out, looking exactly as composed as he had at the gala. "Miss Bennett, right on time." "Punctuality's free," Claire said dryly. Hale's mouth twitched, almost a smile. "Come in. Mr. Calloway is waiting." She followed him inside, her footsteps echoing on polished floors. The interior was exactly what she'd expected. Expensive, cold, designed to impress rather than comfort. Art on the walls that probably belonged in museums. Furniture that looked like no one was allowed to sit on it. Hale led her through a series of hallways, past rooms she didn't have time to look at, until they reached a set of double doors. He knocked once, then pushed them open. The office beyond was massive. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, a desk the size of a small car, windows overlooking the city. And sitting behind the desk, his wheelchair pulled up close, was Ethan Calloway. He looked up when they entered, and Claire got her first real look at him outside the chaos of the gala. He was younger than she'd expected, 32, maybe 33. Dark hair, sharp jawline, eyes that looked like they'd stopped trusting people a long time ago. He wore a tailored shirt with the sleeves rolled up, and there was a tension in his shoulders that said he was used to carrying weight no one else could see. He studied her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he spoke. "You're the translator." "I'm the woman you're going to marry," Claire corrected. "Apparently." Ethan's eyes narrowed. "Hale told you the terms?" "He did." "And you agreed?" "Obviously, or I wouldn't be here." Claire crossed her arms. "But let's get something straight, Mr. Calloway. I'm not doing this because I think you're some tragic hero who needs saving. I'm doing it because I need the money, and you need someone to make you look less pathetic in public. It's a transaction. Let's not pretend it's anything else." Hale made a choking sound. Ethan just stared at her. Then, slowly, something that might have been a smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "You always this blunt? You always this surprised when people tell you the truth?" The almost smile vanished. "Hale, give us the room." Hale hesitated. "Sir? Now." Hale left, closing the doors behind him. Claire stayed where she was, meeting Ethan's gaze without flinching. "You don't like me," Ethan said finally. "I don't know you. But you're here anyway, because I need the money. I told you that." Ethan leaned back in his wheelchair, still watching her like he was trying to figure out if she was real or some kind of elaborate joke. Most people would at least pretend to be sympathetic. Most people didn't just watch your fiancé humiliate you in front of half the city, Claire shot back. "I'm not going to insult your intelligence by pretending I don't know exactly what this is." "And what is it?" "Damage control." She gestured toward the windows, toward the skyline beyond. "You got publicly dumped by a woman who made you look weak. Now you need someone to stand next to you and prove you're still worth betting on. I'm the prop. You're the performance. We both get what we need, and in a year, we walk away." Ethan's jaw tightened. "You make it sound simple, isn't it?" "No." He rolled his wheelchair out from behind the desk, stopping a few feet away from her. "It's not. Because the second you walk into this house, you become a target. My enemies will come after you. The press will tear you apart. And if you crack under the pressure, if you say the wrong thing or show the wrong emotion at the wrong time, this whole thing collapses. So before we sign anything, I need to know, can you handle it?" Claire held his gaze. "Can you?" Ethan's eyes flashed, and for a second she thought she'd pushed too far. Then he laughed, sharp, bitter, unexpected. "You've got nerve, I'll give you that." "I've got bills to pay," Claire said flatly. "Nerve's just a side effect." Ethan studied her for another long moment. Then he reached for a folder on his desk and slid it toward her. "Read it, sign it, and understand that once you do, there's no going back." Claire picked up the folder, flipped it open, and scanned the contract one more time. Everything was there. The money, the timeline, the expectations. 1 year. Public appearances. Maintain the illusion. She pulled out a pen. "One condition," she said. Ethan raised an eyebrow. "You already gave Hale your conditions. This one's for you." Claire met his eyes. "I won't lie to the press, and I won't lie to you. If you ask me a question, you get an honest answer, even if you don't like it." Ethan's expression shifted. Surprise, maybe? Or something close to respect. "Deal," he said quietly. Claire signed her name at the bottom of the contract, and just like that, she became Mrs. Ethan Calloway. The wedding was small, private, brutal in its efficiency. No guests, no flowers, Just a judge, two witnesses, and a photographer to document the moment for the press release that would go out the next morning. Claire wore a simple dress she'd bought off the rack. Ethan wore a suit that probably cost more than her car. They stood in front of the judge. Well, Claire stood. Ethan stayed in his wheelchair and repeated words that meant nothing. When the judge said, "You may kiss the bride," Ethan looked at Claire with an expression that said, "We don't have to do this." But Claire leaned down and pressed her lips to his, brief, clinical, just enough for the photographer to capture. When she pulled back, Ethan's eyes were unreadable. "Welcome to the family," he said quietly. Claire didn't answer. The first night in the Calloway estate, Claire couldn't sleep. Her room, her suite, was 3 times the size of her old apartment, with a bed that felt like sleeping on a cloud and windows that overlooked the city like she owned it. Everything was perfect. Everything was cold. She sat by the window, staring out at the lights, and wondered what the hell she'd just done. Downstairs she could hear voices, low, tense, angry. Ethan and his father, probably. She'd met Richard Calloway exactly once, at the signing, and the man had looked at her like she was a stain on his carpet. "You're a Band-Aid," his expression had said, "and you won't last." Claire pressed her forehead against the glass and closed her eyes. She thought about her father, safe in a hospital bed she could finally afford. She thought about the money in her account, the weight lifting off her chest for the first time in years, and she thought about the man downstairs, the one who'd swallowed his pride and married a stranger to save an empire that was eating him alive. 1 year, she told herself. You can survive anything for 1 year. But as she sat there, listening to the distant sound of Ethan's voice cutting through the silence, she couldn't shake the feeling that she'd just stepped into something far more dangerous than a contract marriage. She'd stepped into a war, and she didn't even know who the enemy was yet. The morning after the wedding, Claire woke to the sound of shouting. She sat up, disoriented, her brain taking a second to catch up with where she was. The suite, the estate, the contract she'd signed that made her Mrs. Ethan Calloway in every legal sense except the one that actually mattered. The shouting got louder. Claire threw off the covers and crossed to the door, pressing her ear against the wood. 2 voices, both male, both furious. One was definitely Ethan. The other had the same clipped, authoritative tone she'd heard from Richard Calloway at the signing. She shouldn't listen. This wasn't her business. She was here to smile for cameras and collect a paycheck, not get involved in family drama. But she opened the door anyway. The voices were coming from downstairs, echoing up through the massive foyer. Claire moved quietly to the top of the staircase, staying out of sight, and looked down. Ethan was in the entrance hall, his wheelchair positioned in front of the main doors like he was blocking an exit. Richard stood opposite him, dressed in a suit that probably cost more than Claire's entire wardrobe, his face twisted with contempt. "You married a translator," Richard spat. "A nobody. Do you have any idea what the board is going to say?" "I don't give a damn what the board says." Ethan's voice was low, controlled, but there was steel underneath. "I did what I had to do." "What you had to do was keep Vanessa Hart from walking out in the first place." Richard took a step closer. "You were supposed to secure that merger. Instead, you let her humiliate you in front of everyone who matters. And now you think some random woman with a college degree is going to fix it? She's not random. She's smart. She's capable. And she doesn't have an agenda." Richard laughed, bitter, sharp. "Everyone has an agenda, Ethan. You're just too blind to see hers yet." "At least she's not trying to destroy me from the inside," Ethan shot back, "which is more than I can say for half the people in this house." Richard's expression went cold. "Careful." "Or what?" Ethan rolled his wheelchair forward, closing the distance between them. "You'll cut me out? Replace me? Go ahead. See how long the empire lasts without me." "It would last longer than it will with you dragging it down." Richard's voice dropped, vicious. "You're weak, Ethan. The accident proved it. Vanessa proved it. And now you're proving it again by clinging to some fantasy that a contract marriage is going to save you." Claire's hands tightened on the banister. Ethan didn't flinch. "Get out of my house." "This isn't your house. It's the family's house. And until you prove you can actually run the company without destroying it, you don't get to make demands." "I said get out." Richard stared at his son for a long, tense moment. Then he turned and walked toward the door, pausing just before he reached it. "You've got 6 months," he said without looking back. 6 months to turn this disaster around. If you can't, I'm calling a board vote, and we both know how that ends." The door slammed behind him. Ethan sat there, alone in the middle of the foyer, his shoulders rigid, his hands clenched on the armrests. Claire watched him from the top of the stairs, her stomach twisting. She should have stayed in her room. She shouldn't have heard any of this. But she had. And now she understood exactly what kind of pressure Ethan Calloway was under. She turned to head back to her suite before he noticed her, but her foot caught the edge of the runner and she stumbled. The noise echoed through the foyer like a gunshot. Ethan's head snapped up. Their eyes met across the distance, and for a second neither of them moved. Then Ethan's jaw tightened. "How long have you been standing there?" "Long enough." Claire straightened, refusing to look guilty. "Your father's a real charmer. He's protective of the company. He called you weak. He's not wrong." Claire started down the stairs, her hand trailing along the banister. "Yes, he is." Ethan watched her descend, his expression guarded. "You've known me for 2 days. You don't know what I'm capable of. I know you didn't beg Vanessa to stay." Claire reached the bottom of the staircase and stopped a few feet away from him. "I know you signed a contract with a stranger instead of rolling over and letting your empire collapse. And I know you just told your father to get out of your house, which takes more spine than most people have." Ethan's eyes narrowed. "That doesn't mean I'm not weak. It means you're still fighting," Claire said bluntly. "Weak people give up. You're still here." He stared at her like he was trying to decide if she was mocking him or if she actually meant it. Claire didn't wait for him to figure it out. "I'm going to make coffee. You want some?" Ethan blinked, thrown. "What?" "Coffee? It's a beverage. People drink it in the morning." She turned toward what she assumed was the kitchen. "I'm guessing you could use some." "The staff handles that." "Great. Where are they?" "It's 6 in the morning. They don't start until 7. Claire looked back at him, eyebrows raised. "So that's a yes?" For the first time since she'd met him, Ethan Calloway looked genuinely confused. "You don't have to." "I know I don't have to. I'm offering." She started walking again. "You coming, or are you going to sit there and brood?" She heard the soft whir of his wheelchair behind her, and she hid a smile. The kitchen was absurdly large, marble countertops, industrial-grade appliances, enough space to cook for a small army. Claire found the coffee maker after opening 3 wrong cabinets, and by the time she'd figured out how to work the stupidly complicated machine, Ethan had rolled up beside the counter. "You don't know how to use it," he said, watching her fumble with the buttons. "I'm figuring it out. There's a manual." "I don't need a manual. I need this thing to stop acting like it requires a degree in engineering." She jabbed at another button, and the machine beeped indignantly. "Who designs a coffee maker with 12 settings?" "It's coffee. You brew it, that's it." Ethan reached over and pressed a single button. The machine hummed to life. Claire glared at it. "That's what I did. You pressed the espresso setting. It's all the same." "It's really not." "Well, now I know." She leaned against the counter, crossing her arms. "You always this helpful, or am I special?" "You're persistent. There's a difference." The coffee finished brewing, and Claire poured 2 cups, sliding one across the counter to Ethan. He took it without comment, and they stood there in the massive, silent kitchen, drinking coffee while the city woke up outside the windows. "Your father thinks I'm going to screw this up," Claire said finally. "He thinks everyone's going to screw it up. It's not personal." Felt pretty personal. Ethan took a sip of his coffee, his gaze distant. He's been running this company for 40 years. He built it into what it is, and now he's watching his son, who was supposed to take over seamlessly, struggle to hold it together. So yeah, he's angry, but it's not about you. It's about you. It's about survival. Ethan set the cup down, his fingers drumming against the counter. The Calloway Group isn't just a business. It's a legacy. Generations of work, of strategy, of power. And if I lose it, I don't just lose a company. I lose everything my family built. Claire studied him. "Is that why you agreed to this? The contract marriage?" "Partly." "What's the other part?" Ethan met her eyes, and for a moment she saw something raw underneath the control. "Because I'm tired of people treating me like I'm already dead." The words hung in the air between them, heavy and honest. Claire didn't know what to say to that, so she just nodded. They finished their coffee in silence. Later that morning, Marcus Hale appeared in the doorway of Claire's suite with a tablet and an expression that said, "We have work to do." "Good, you're up." He stepped inside without waiting for an invitation. "We need to talk strategy." Claire, who'd been halfway through getting dressed, grabbed a robe and tied it around herself. "Ever heard of knocking?" "I did knock. You didn't answer." Hale set the tablet on the desk and started swiping through screens. "We've got 3 events lined up for the next 2 weeks. A charity gala, a business luncheon, and a private dinner with some of the company's major investors. You'll attend all of them with Ethan." "Okay." Hale looked up, surprised. "That's it? No complaints?" "I signed a contract that says I show up and look supportive. That's what I'm doing." Claire sat down on the edge of the bed. "What else do you need?" Hale studied her for a moment, then nodded slowly. "You'll need a wardrobe. The stylist will be here this afternoon. Don't argue with her. She knows what works for cameras." "I'm not arguing with anyone. I'm just doing my job." "Good." Hale swiped to another screen. "You'll also need to get comfortable with the press. They're going to ask questions, lots of them. Where you met, how long you've been together, why you're not Vanessa Hart. I'll handle it." "Miss Bennett, I said I'll handle it." Claire met his eyes. "I'm not an idiot, Mr. Hale. I know how this works. I smile. I say we're happy. I don't give them anything they can twist into a headline. It's not complicated." Hale's mouth twitched. "You're more prepared than I expected. I'm a translator. Half my job is reading people and knowing what they want to hear." She stood, tightening the robe. "Is there anything else?" "One more thing." Hale's expression turned serious. "Vanessa Hart gave an interview last night. It's already trending." Claire's stomach sank. "What did she say?" Hale handed her the tablet. The video was queued up and ready to play. Claire hit the button, and Vanessa Hart's face filled the screen. Perfect makeup, perfect lighting, perfect victim expression. The interviewer leaned forward, all sympathy. "Vanessa, thank you for sitting down with us. I know this has been a difficult time." "It has," Vanessa said softly, "but I think it's important to be honest about what happened." "And what did happen?" "There's been a lot of speculation since the engagement ended." Vanessa took a delicate breath. "I loved Ethan. I really did. But after the accident, he changed. He became distant, angry. And I tried to support him, I really did, but he pushed me away. He made it clear that he didn't want my help." "That must have been painful." "It was, but I couldn't stay in a relationship where I wasn't valued, where I was treated like an obligation instead of a partner." So Vanessa's eyes glistened, actually glistened, like she'd practiced crying on cue. "And now, seeing him rush into a marriage with someone he barely knows, it just confirms that I made the right choice." The interviewer nodded. "Do you have any message for Ethan's new wife?" Vanessa smiled, small, sad, devastatingly effective. "I hope she knows what she's getting into, because Ethan Calloway isn't the man he used to be, and I'm not sure he ever will be again." The video ended. Claire set the tablet down, her jaw tight. "She's good." "She's dangerous," Hale corrected. "That interview has been viewed 3 million times in 12 hours. The narrative is already shifting. People are starting to feel sorry for her." "Let them." Hale frowned. "Miss Bennett?" "Let them feel sorry for her," Claire repeated. "Because when we show up at that gala in 2 weeks, and I'm standing next to Ethan looking like I actually chose to be there, her whole victim act falls apart. People love an underdog. Right now, she's playing the abandoned fiancé. But the second they see us together, happy, functional, real, she becomes the woman who walked away from something good. And that's a much harder story to sell." Hale stared at her. Then, slowly, he smiled. "You really are smarter than I expected. Thanks for the vote of confidence. One question." Hale picked up the tablet. "Can you actually pull that off? Looking happy?" Claire thought about Ethan sitting alone in the foyer after his father left. She thought about the way he'd said, "I'm tired of people treating me like I'm already dead." "Yeah," she said quietly. "I can pull it off." That afternoon, the stylist arrived with enough clothing to fill a small boutique. Her name was Monica, and she moved through Claire's suite like a general inspecting troops, pulling dresses out of garment bags and holding them up to the light with a critical eye. "Okay, so here's the situation," Monica said, draping a navy gown over the back of a chair. "You're the new wife. You're not trying to be Vanessa because Vanessa is ice and diamonds and old money. You're warmth. You're real. You're the woman who saw past the wheelchair and fell for the man. Claire, who was standing in the middle of the room in her underwear while Monica circled her like a shark, raised an eyebrow. You know this is fake, right? Honey, everything's fake until it looks real on camera. Monica pulled out another dress, emerald green, simple, elegant. This one. Try it on. Claire pulled the dress over her head, and Monica zipped her up, tugging at the fabric until it sat perfectly. There. Monica stepped back, nodding. That's the one for the gala. Understated but confident. You're not competing with anyone. You're just there, supporting him. Claire looked at herself in the mirror. The dress fit like it had been made for her, hugging her curves without being obvious about it, the color bringing out the warmth in her skin. She looked expensive. She looked like she belonged. She hated how good that felt. What about jewelry? Claire asked. Keep it simple. Small earrings, maybe a bracelet. Nothing that screams, look at me. Monica pulled out her phone and started typing. I'll have options sent over tomorrow. Now, let's talk about hair and makeup. I can handle my own hair and makeup. Monica looked up, skeptical. You sure? I've been getting ready for events my entire adult life. I think I can manage. Fair enough? Monica zipped up the garment bags. But if you change your mind, call me. I've made worse situations look good. After Monica left, Claire stood in front of the mirror, still wearing the green dress, and wondered what the hell she was doing. 2 weeks ago, she'd been drowning in bills and taking every translation job she could find just to keep her head above water. Now she was standing in a mansion, wearing a dress that cost more than her monthly rent, preparing to lie to the entire world about being in love with a man she barely knew. And the worst part? She was starting to think she could actually pull it off. A knock on the door broke her thoughts. Come in, she called. The door opened and Ethan rolled inside, stopping when he saw her. His expression shifted, something between surprise and something else Claire couldn't quite read. You look, he trailed off. Like I'm worth $500,000? Claire turned away from the mirror. That's the point, right? Ethan's jaw tightened. I was going to say you look good. Same thing. It's not. Claire crossed her arms. Did you need something, or are you just here to critique the wardrobe? Ethan rolled closer, his eyes still on her. Hale told me about Vanessa's interview. Yeah, she's selling the heartbroken ex-fiancé angle pretty hard. And you're okay with that? I'm okay with letting her dig her own grave. Claire sat down on the arm of the chair, the dress pooling around her. She's betting that people will feel sorry for her, but the second we show up together and you look like you've moved on, she loses. Because nobody likes the person who walked away and then came back crying about it. Ethan studied her. You've thought about this. I've thought about a lot of things. Claire met his gaze. Including the fact that your father's right about one thing. I do have an agenda. I need this to work so I can get paid and take care of my dad. So, yeah, I'm invested in making you look good. Because if you fail, I fail. And I don't plan on failing. Ethan was quiet for a moment. Then he said, Your father, what's wrong with him? Claire hesitated. She didn't talk about this, not with anyone. But Ethan was watching her with something that looked almost like genuine curiosity, and she found herself answering, Heart condition, chronic. He needs surgery, but it's expensive, and insurance only covers part of it. She looked down at her hands. He was a professor, linguistics. He taught me everything I know about languages, about how words can build bridges or burn them down. And now he's in a hospital bed, and I can't fix it. So you took this job. So I took this job, Claire agreed, because $500,000 fixes it, and I'd do a lot worse than fake a marriage to save my father. Ethan nodded slowly. I get that. Do you? Yeah. He looked toward the window, his expression distant. I'd do a lot worse to save what my family built, even if it means marrying someone I don't love. The honesty of it hit Claire harder than she expected. We're both pretty ruthless, huh? She said quietly. Ethan looked back at her and something like a smile crossed his face. Yeah, I guess we are. They sat there in silence for a moment, the weight of the contract between them feeling a little less cold. Then Ethan cleared his throat. There's something else. I'm hosting a dinner here tomorrow night, some of the company's board members. My father will be there. Claire's stomach dropped. Sounds fun. It won't be. Ethan's hands tightened on the armrests. They're going to test you, see if you crack. If you say the wrong thing, or if you look uncomfortable, they'll use it against me. So I need to be perfect. You need to be convincing. Ethan met her eyes. Can you do that? Claire thought about her father, about the hospital bills, about the fact that she'd already signed her name to a contract that said she'd do exactly this. Yeah, she said, I can do that. The next night, Claire stood in front of her closet and tried not to panic. Monica had left her a dozen options, but none of them felt right. Too formal, too casual, too obvious. She finally settled on a simple black dress. Classic, understated, the kind of thing that said, I'm not trying to impress you, but I'm not intimidated either. She pulled her hair back into a low bun, added small gold earrings, and checked herself in the mirror one last time. You can do this. It's just dinner, just a few hours. Downstairs, the dining room had been transformed. The long table was set with crystal and silverware that probably cost more than Claire's car, and staff moved quietly through the space, making final adjustments. Ethan was already there, positioned at the head of the table, dressed in a sharp suit that made him look every inch the heir to an empire. He looked up when Claire entered, and his eyes did that thing again, the quick flicker of surprise before the mask came back down. You ready? He asked. As I'll ever be. The guests started arriving 15 minutes later. Richard Calloway came first, his expression neutral, but his eyes sharp as they landed on Claire. Then came the board members, men and women in their 50s and 60s, dressed in expensive suits and practiced smiles. Claire shook hands, smiled, and made small talk, all while feeling like she was being dissected. So, Mrs. Calloway, one of the board members, a woman named Diane, said as they sat down for dinner, how did you and Ethan meet? Claire had practiced this. She and Ethan had gone over the story twice. At a conference, Claire said smoothly. I was translating for one of the international partners. Ethan was there for a presentation. We started talking during a break, and she glanced at Ethan, letting her expression soften. I don't know. It just felt easy. Ethan's hand moved across the table, covering hers. The touch was warm, deliberate, and completely for show. But it worked. Diane smiled. How lovely. And the wedding was quite sudden, wasn't it? It was, Ethan said before Claire could answer. But when you know, you know. Richard, sitting at the opposite end of the table, made a sound that might have been a scoff. Claire's fingers tightened under Ethan's hand, but she kept her smile in place. Dinner continued, courses that Claire barely tasted, wine that she sipped slowly, and conversation that felt like a minefield. Then halfway through the main course, Richard set down his fork and looked directly at Claire. Tell me, Mrs. Calloway, he said, his tone deceptively casual. What do you know about the Calloway Group's portfolio? Claire felt every pair of eyes turned toward her. This was the test. Richard wasn't asking because he cared about her answer. He was asking because he wanted to prove she didn't belong here. Claire set down her own fork, meeting Richard's gaze without flinching. I know you've got interests in real estate, energy, and tech, she said evenly. I know the merger with Hart Media was supposed to expand your influence in communications, but that fell through when Vanessa walked. And I know that right now you're sitting on 3 major deals that are waiting to close, but investors are nervous because they're not sure if Ethan's capable of running the company. The table went silent. Richard's eyes narrowed. And where did you hear that? I read. Claire picked up her wine glass. I also pay attention. It's not exactly a secret that people are watching to see if Ethan fails. And what do you think? Richard leaned forward. Do you think he's capable? Claire looked at Ethan, who was watching her with an unreadable expression. Then she looked back at Richard. I think anyone who underestimates him is going to regret it, she said quietly. And I think you know that. Otherwise, you wouldn't be so worried. Richard stared at her, his expression frozen somewhere between shock and fury. Then slowly, he leaned back in his chair. Well, he said, his voice tight, at least she's not a pushover. The tension broke. Diane laughed. Another board member raised his glass in a mock toast, and Ethan's hand tightened around Claire's just for a second before he let go. The rest of dinner passed without incident, and by the time the guests left, Claire felt like she'd just survived a battlefield. She found Ethan in his office afterward, staring at his computer screen like it had personally offended him. "You okay?" she asked from the doorway. Ethan looked up. "I should be asking you that." "I'm fine." "You were incredible tonight." He said it like he was stating a fact, not giving a compliment. "The way you handled my father, I've never seen anyone do that." Claire shrugged. "He was testing me. I don't like tests." "Clearly." Ethan leaned back in his chair. "Where did you learn to do that? Read a room like that?" "My dad," Claire said. "He used to say that words only matter if you understand the person listening. So I learned to pay attention, to read body language, tone, intent. It's how I became a good translator." Ethan studied her. "You're a lot more than a translator, Claire." She didn't know what to say to that, so she just nodded. "Get some sleep," Ethan said, "but the gala's in 10 days. And if tonight was the warm-up, that's going to be the real fight." Claire turned to leave, then paused. "Ethan?" "Yeah?" "Thanks for backing me up tonight." Ethan's expression softened, just a fraction. "You didn't need me to, but you're welcome." Claire left him there, alone in his office, and headed back to her suite. And as she lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling, she realized something that scared her more than Richard Calloway's tests or Vanessa Hart's interviews or any of it. She was starting to care, not about the money, not about the contract, about Ethan. And that wasn't part of the plan at all. The days leading up to the gala blurred together in a strange rhythm Claire hadn't expected. Mornings meant coffee in the kitchen with Ethan, sometimes in silence, sometimes with him rattling off his schedule while she listened and remembered details he'd forget by noon. Afternoons were hers, mostly, spent reviewing documents Ethan would casually leave on her desk with notes like thoughts. Or does this sound insane? And evenings meant dinners where they sat across from each other and pretended this was normal. Except it was starting to feel normal. And that was the problem. Claire caught herself laughing at something Ethan said about a board member's terrible toupee. She found herself asking about his physical therapy sessions, not because the contract required it, but because she wanted to know if the pain was getting better. She started recognizing the difference between his "I'm fine" voice and his "I'm actually fine" voice. And worse, far worse, she started noticing the way he looked at her when he thought she wasn't paying attention. It was a week before the gala when everything shifted. Claire was in Ethan's office, sitting across from his desk with a stack of financial reports spread out in front of her. He'd asked her to look over the quarterly earnings before they went to the board, and she'd found 3 discrepancies that didn't add up. "Here." She slid one of the reports toward him, pointing at a line of numbers. "This expense is listed twice. Different departments, same amount, same date. Either someone made a mistake or someone's skimming." Ethan leaned forward, his eyes scanning the page. "How did you catch that?" "I'm a translator. I notice patterns. Some numbers are just another language." Claire pulled out another report. "And this one, there's a transfer to a subsidiary that doesn't match any of the approved budgets. It's not huge, but it's consistent, every month for the past 6 months." Ethan's expression darkened. "Who approved these?" Claire checked the signature line. "Gerald Moss, my father's CFO." Ethan sat back, his jaw tight. "He's been with the company for 20 years. Then either he's getting sloppy or he's getting greedy." Claire met Ethan's eyes. "You need to audit him, quietly, before he realizes you're looking." Ethan stared at the reports like they'd personally betrayed him. Then he looked up at Claire, and there was something in his expression she hadn't seen before. Respect, maybe, or surprise that she'd actually found something real. "You didn't have to do this," he said quietly. "I know." "So why did you?" Claire hesitated. The easy answer was because it's part of the deal. But that wasn't true anymore, and they both knew it. "Because someone's stealing from you," she said finally, "and I don't like thieves." Ethan held her gaze for a long moment. Then he reached for his phone. "I'm calling Marcus. We're running a full audit on Moss starting today." "Ethan, what?" "If Moss is dirty, he's not working alone. People like that don't operate in a vacuum." Claire leaned forward. "You pull the thread too hard, too fast, and whoever else is involved will run. You need to be smart about this." Ethan's mouth curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. "You sound like you've done this before." "I've translated for enough corporate espionage cases to know how it works." Claire stood gathering the reports. Start with the subsidiary, track where the money's actually going. Once you have proof, you can move. And in the meantime? In the meantime, you smile at Gerald Moss like you don't suspect a thing, and you let him think he's getting away with it. Ethan watched her, his expression unreadable. You're kind of terrifying when you want to be. I'll take that as a compliment. It was. Claire left the office before she could say something stupid, like, I'm starting to care whether you lose this company, or worse, I'm starting to care about you. But the truth was already sitting heavy in her chest, and ignoring it wasn't making it go away. That night, Claire couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about the numbers, about Gerald Moss, about the way Ethan's entire world seemed to be built on people waiting for him to fail. She thought about Richard Calloway's cold eyes and Vanessa Hart's perfect victim act, and the way Ethan sat alone in his office every night, like he was carrying the weight of the world on his shoulders. She thought about the contract in her desk drawer, the one that said she had 10 more months before she could walk away with her money and her life, and nothing tying her to this place. And she thought about how much harder it was getting to imagine actually leaving. Around 2 in the morning, she gave up on sleep and went downstairs to the kitchen. The house was dark, silent, the kind of quiet that felt too big. She was halfway through making tea when she heard the soft whir of Ethan's wheelchair behind her. Can't sleep either, he asked. Claire turned, unsurprised. Apparently not. Ethan rolled closer, stopping near the counter. He was still dressed, which meant he probably hadn't even tried to sleep. You're thinking about Moss. Among other things. Like what? Claire poured hot water over her tea bag, watching the color bleed into the cup. Like the fact that you've got enemies inside your own company. Like the fact that your father would probably throw you under a bus if it meant saving the empire. Like the fact that I'm supposed to be a stranger who showed up for a paycheck, but I'm standing in your kitchen at 2 in the morning worrying about your CFO embezzling funds. Ethan was quiet for a moment. Then he said, You're not a stranger anymore? Claire's hands tightened on the mug. I'm supposed to be. Yeah, well, things change. She turned to face him, leaning against the counter. Do they? Because in 10 months, I walk away. That was the deal. I know. So what are we doing, Ethan? The question came out sharper than she meant it to. Because this, whatever this is, it's not part of the contract. Ethan met her eyes, and the walls he usually kept up weren't there. I don't know what we're doing, but I know I trust you, and I haven't trusted anyone in a long time. Claire's chest tightened. That's a bad idea. Probably. I'm serious. You don't know me, not really. I could be... You're not, Ethan said flatly. You're not like them. You don't want something from me. You're just here. I want the money. No, you wanted the money. Past tense. Ethan rolled closer, close enough that she could see the exhaustion in his eyes, the weight he carried that nobody else seemed to notice. Now you're here because you want to be. And don't lie and say you're not. Claire opened her mouth to argue, to tell him he was wrong, that this was still just a job, that she hadn't changed the rules, but the words wouldn't come, because he was right. This is a bad idea, she said again, quieter this time. Yeah, Ethan agreed. It probably is. They stood there in the dark kitchen, the space between them feeling smaller than it should, and Claire realized with absolute clarity that she was in trouble. She'd signed up to fake a marriage. She hadn't signed up to actually care. But here she was, caring. The gala was 3 days away when Vanessa Hart showed up at the estate. Claire was in the garden, a massive, perfectly manicured space behind the house that she'd been exploring when she needed to clear her head, when she heard voices coming from the front drive. She walked around the side of the house and stopped dead. Vanessa stood near the entrance, dressed in white, like she was trying to look innocent, her hair perfect, her expression calm. And standing in front of her, blocking the door, was Ethan. You need to leave, Ethan was saying, his voice low and controlled. I just want to talk. Vanessa's tone was soft, pleading. 5 minutes, Ethan. That's all I'm asking. You don't get 5 minutes. You don't get anything. Ethan's hands were tight on his armrests. You made your choice. Live with it. I made a mistake. Vanessa took a step closer, her eyes glistening. I was scared, and I said things I didn't mean, and I've regretted it every day since. Please, just no. Ethan, I said no. His voice cut through hers like a blade. You humiliated me in front of everyone I know. You called me broken. You walked away when I needed you most, and now you want me to believe you've changed your mind? Vanessa's face crumpled, and Claire had to admit, the woman was good. If Claire didn't know better, she'd almost believe the tears were real. I still love you, Vanessa whispered. You love what I represent. You love the name, the money, the power. You never loved me. Ethan's jaw tightened. And I'm done pretending that's enough. That's when Vanessa's gaze shifted, landing on Claire. Her expression changed, just for a second, a flash of something cold and calculating before the mask came back. Ah, Vanessa said, straightening. The new wife, how lovely. Claire stepped forward, keeping her expression neutral. Miss Hart. Mrs. Calloway, Vanessa corrected, her smile sharp. Oh, wait. That's you now, isn't it? Tell me, how does it feel to be a replacement? I wouldn't know, Claire said evenly. I'm not replacing anyone. I'm just the person who showed up. Vanessa's eyes narrowed. Ethan doesn't love you. You know that, right? This whole thing is just damage control, a Band-Aid. Maybe, Claire said, but at least I didn't abandon him when things got hard. The words landed like a slap. Vanessa's composure cracked just for a second, her perfect face twisting with something ugly. Then she smoothed it over, turning back to Ethan. This isn't over, she said quietly. Yes, Ethan said, it is. Vanessa stared at him for a long moment. Then she turned and walked back to her car, her heels clicking against the pavement. Claire waited until the car disappeared down the drive before she looked at Ethan. You okay? She asked. Ethan didn't answer right away. He just sat there, staring at the space where Vanessa had been, his expression unreadable. Yeah, he said finally. I'm okay. But Claire could hear the lie. That night, Claire found Ethan in the library, a room she'd barely set foot in, filled with books that probably hadn't been touched in years. He was sitting near the window, a glass of whiskey in his hand, staring out at the city lights. You're drinking, Claire said from the doorway. Observant. You don't usually drink. I don't usually have my ex-fiancée show up and tell me she made a mistake. Ethan took a sip, not looking at her. Turns out that's the kind of thing that makes you want whiskey. Claire crossed the room and sat down in the chair across from him. You don't believe her? No. Good. Ethan finally looked at her. Why good? Because she doesn't love you. She loves the idea of you. The version of you that came with power and status and no complications. Claire leaned forward. And the second things got complicated, she ran. That's not love, that's convenience. Ethan's mouth twisted into something bitter. And what would you know about love? Not much, Claire admitted, but I know what it's not. And it's not whatever Vanessa was selling. Ethan stared into his glass. She called me broken. She's an idiot. She's not wrong. Yes, she is. Claire's voice sharpened. You're not broken, Ethan. You're hurt. There's a difference. Is there? Yeah. Broken means unfixable. Hurt means you're still here, still fighting, still running a goddamn empire from a wheelchair while everyone around you waits for you to fail. Claire stood, crossing to the window. You want to know what I see when I look at you? Ethan didn't answer, but he was watching her now, his full attention locked on her. I see someone who refuses to quit. Someone who could have given up after the accident, after Vanessa, after all of it, and didn't. I see someone who's stronger than anyone gives him credit for. She turned to face him. So no, you're not broken, and anyone who says otherwise is either blind or lying. The silence stretched between them, heavy and charged. Then Ethan set down his glass and said, Come to the gala with me. Claire blinked. I'm already going with you. That's the whole point. No, I mean, come with me because you want to, not because Hale scheduled it or because the contract says you have to. Ethan's eyes held hers. Come with me because you're choosing to. Claire's breath caught. This was the line, the one they'd been dancing around for weeks. Cross it, and everything changed. Stay on this side, and she could still pretend this was just a job. Okay, she said quietly. Ethan's expression shifted. Surprise, relief, something that looked almost like hope. Okay, he repeated. And just like that, the contract didn't matter anymore. The night of the gala arrived faster than Claire expected. She stood in front of the mirror in her suite, wearing the emerald green dress Monica had chosen. Her hair swept up, her hands shaking just enough that she had to set down her earrings twice before she got them in. This was it. The moment where everything either worked or fell apart. There was a knock on the door, and Ethan's voice came through. "You ready?" Claire took a breath. "Yeah, come in." The door opened, and Ethan rolled inside, dressed in a black tuxedo that made him look like he'd stepped out of a magazine. He stopped when he saw her, and his expression did that thing again, the one that made Claire's stomach flip. "You look—" He stopped, shaking his head. "You look incredible. You clean up pretty well yourself." Claire grabbed her clutch, trying to ignore the way her pulse was hammering. "Ready to face the wolves?" "With you?" "Yeah." They took the car to the venue, a historic palace on the edge of the city that had been rented out for the evening. The place was already packed, cameras flashing as guests arrived, reporters shouting questions from behind velvet ropes. Claire felt Ethan tense beside her as their car pulled up. "Hey," she said, reaching over to touch his hand. "We've got this." Ethan looked at her and some of the tension eased. "Yeah, we do." The door opened and the noise hit them like a wave. Ethan rolled out first, and Claire stepped out beside him, and the cameras went insane. "Mr. Calloway, over here!" "Mrs. Calloway, how does it feel to be married? Is it true you met at a conference? What do you say to people who think this is just for show?" Claire kept her expression calm, her hand resting lightly on Ethan's shoulder, a gesture Monica had coached her on. Supportive, but not possessive. Like your equals. They made their way inside, past the reporters, into the main ballroom where the real work began. The room was stunning. Chandeliers, marble floors, tables draped in silk. And everywhere Claire looked, she saw people watching them. Investors, competitors, society vultures who wanted to see if the new Mrs. Calloway would crack under pressure. "Breathe," Ethan murmured. "I'm breathing." "You're holding your breath," Claire exhaled slowly. "Better?" "Better." They moved through the crowd, shaking hands, making small talk, playing the part. Claire smiled at people whose names she'd never remember and nodded along to conversations about markets and mergers and money. And then across the room, she saw her. Vanessa Hart, dressed in silver, surrounded by admirers, her smile perfect and cold. Their eyes met, and Vanessa's expression shifted into something almost predatory. She was coming over. "Ethan," Claire said quietly, "I see her." Vanessa reached them, her smile wide, her voice dripping with false warmth. "Ethan, Claire, what a lovely surprise." "Vanessa," Ethan's tone was flat. "I didn't realize you'd be here." "Oh, you know me. I never miss an opportunity to support the arts." Vanessa's gaze slid to Claire. "And I was so curious to meet the woman who managed to land Ethan Calloway in, what was it, 3 weeks?" "2," Claire corrected. "But who's counting?" Vanessa's smile tightened. "It must be quite the adjustment, going from translating documents to running in these circles." "It's not that different, actually," Claire said smoothly. "Both require knowing what people really mean when they're talking, and what they're not saying." Vanessa's eyes narrowed. "And what do you think I'm not saying?" "That you regret walking away." Claire kept her voice light, conversational. "That you thought Ethan would fall apart without you, and you're realizing he didn't. That seeing him move on scares you more than you want to admit." The crowd around them had gone quiet, people leaning in to listen. Vanessa's composure cracked, her voice dropping. "You don't know anything about me." "I know enough." Claire stepped closer. "I know you're cruel. I know you humiliated a man you claimed to love because he didn't fit your perfect image anymore. And I know that no matter what you do now, you're always going to be the woman who walked away. That's your legacy, Vanessa, not his." Vanessa's face flushed, her hands clenching at her sides. "You think you're so clever." The explosion cut her off. The sound was deafening, a thunderous crack that shook the entire building. The chandeliers swayed, glass shattered. And then the screaming started. Claire's ears rang, her vision blurring as smoke began to fill the ballroom. People were running, shoving, panicking. She looked down at Ethan, who was gripping his armrests, his face pale. "We need to move," he said. No. Claire grabbed the handles of his wheelchair. We need to get you out of here. Claire, shut up and let me help you. Another explosion rocked the building, closer this time. The lights flickered and died, plunging the room into chaos. Claire pushed Ethan's wheelchair forward, weaving through the panicked crowd, her heart hammering. The smoke was getting thicker, burning her lungs, and she could barely see 3 feet in front of her. There! Ethan pointed toward a side exit, barely visible through the haze. Claire pushed harder, her arms screaming, her lungs burning. They reached the door just as a third explosion tore through the far side of the ballroom. The force of it knocked Claire sideways, and she stumbled, her hand slipping off the wheelchair. Ethan caught her wrist, pulling her back. Don't let go, he said, his voice rough. I won't. They burst through the exit into a hallway, cleaner air hitting Claire's face like a blessing. Behind them, the ballroom was collapsing into chaos. Fire, smoke, people screaming. Security was trying to get people out, shouting orders, but it was pandemonium. Claire kept pushing, following the hallway to a back exit, and finally, they burst outside into the night air. Claire collapsed against the wall, coughing, her whole body shaking. Ethan was beside her, his face streaked with soot, his eyes wild. Are you hurt? He demanded. I'm fine. Are you? I'm fine. They stared at each other, both of them gasping for air, and Claire realized something with absolute certainty. Someone had just tried to kill them. And this wasn't over. Sirens cut through the night air, getting louder with every second. Claire's lungs still burned from the smoke. Her hands were shaking, and she couldn't stop replaying the moment when the first explosion had ripped through the ballroom. The sound. The heat. The way Ethan's face had gone white. Emergency vehicles screeched to a stop in front of the palace, and paramedics poured out, rushing toward the people stumbling from the building. Claire watched them move, her brain trying to process what had just happened while her body stayed locked in survival mode. Mrs. Calloway. She turned to find Marcus Hale jogging toward them, his suit jacket gone, his shirt torn at the shoulder. Blood streaked down the side of his face from a cut near his temple, but he was moving like it didn't matter. Are you hurt? He demanded, his eyes scanning both of them. We're fine, Ethan said before Claire could answer. His voice was steady, but his hands were still gripping the armrests hard enough that his knuckles had gone white. What the hell happened? 3 explosive devices, planted in different locations throughout the ballroom. Hale pulled out his phone, his fingers already moving across the screen. Security's reviewing footage now, but initial reports say they were triggered remotely. Someone wanted maximum damage. Claire's stomach dropped. This wasn't an accident. No. Hale's expression was grim. This was an attack. And you two were in the center of it. Ethan's jaw tightened. Who else was hurt? Injuries, mostly minor, some smoke inhalation. A few people trampled in the panic. Hale glanced toward the palace, where firefighters were still working to contain the blaze. Could have been a lot worse. Could have been us, Claire said quietly. Hale met her eyes, and she saw the confirmation there. This wasn't random. Someone had targeted the gala, and whether they'd been aiming specifically for Ethan or just wanted to cause chaos, the result was the same. They'd almost died. A paramedic approached, trying to convince Ethan to get checked out, but he waved her off. I'm fine. Check the people who were actually hurt. Sir, you inhaled a lot of smoke. I said I'm fine. Ethan's voice cut through the night like a blade, and the paramedic backed off, moving toward someone else. Claire crouched down beside his wheelchair, lowering her voice. You need to let them look at you. I need to figure out who just tried to blow me up. Ethan's eyes were hard, focused. And I need to do it before they try again. Ethan, don't. He looked at her, and the fear underneath the anger was raw enough to hurt. Don't tell me to be careful. Don't tell me to wait. Someone just attacked a room full of people to get to me, and I'm not going to sit here and pretend that's not what this was. Claire wanted to argue. She wanted to tell him he was wrong, that maybe this was random, that maybe it had nothing to do with him. But she couldn't, because he was right. Hale's phone buzzed, and he answered it, his expression darkening as he listened. When he hung up, he looked at Ethan with something close to dread. What? Ethan demanded. That was building security. They pulled the footage from the loading dock cameras. Hale hesitated. Gerald Moss was seen entering the building 4 hours before the gala. He wasn't on the guest list. The name hit Claire like a punch to the chest. Gerald Moss, the CFO they'd found skimming funds, the man Ethan had been quietly investigating. Ethan's face went cold. Where is he now? Gone. Left before the first explosion. Security's trying to track him, but he knew exactly when to get out, Ethan finished, his hands clenched into fists. He planted the bombs, or he knew who did. We don't have proof yet. I don't need proof. I need answers. Ethan spun his wheelchair toward the car, his voice sharp. Get me home, now. The drive back to the estate was silent, except for the sound of Hale making calls, coordinating security, pulling information. Claire sat beside Ethan in the back seat, watching the city lights blur past, and tried to ignore the way her hands wouldn't stop shaking. When they finally pulled through the gates, the house looked the same as it always did. Massive, imposing, untouchable. But Claire knew better now. Nowhere was safe. Not really. Ethan went straight to his office, and Claire followed without asking permission. Hale came in behind them, closing the door and locking it. Talk, Ethan said, his eyes on Hale. Everything you know. Hale pulled out his tablet, swiping through files. Gerald Moss has been with the company for 22 years. Clean record, no red flags until Claire found the discrepancies in the financials 3 weeks ago. How much did he take? Claire asked. Close to $8 million over the past 2 years, small amounts spread across multiple accounts, filtered through the subsidiary you flagged. Hale pulled up a document. But here's where it gets worse. The subsidiary is owned by a shell corporation, and that shell corporation has ties to Victor Kane. Ethan went very still. Kane. Claire looked between them. Who's Victor Kane? Politician, Ethan said, his voice flat. Running for Senate. Made his career on anti-corruption platforms and taking down corporate greed. His mouth twisted. And apparently funding his campaign by stealing from the companies he claims to be protecting. Kane's been pushing legislation that would have hurt the Callaway Group, Hale added. New regulations, increased oversight, policies that would have cost you millions. But if he owns you through Moss, he controls you. He gets the political win and the financial leverage. Claire's brain was racing. So Moss was funneling money to Kane, and when we started investigating, they panicked. They didn't just panic, Ethan said quietly. They tried to kill us. The room went silent. Hale set down the tablet. We need to go to the authorities, turn over everything we have. No. Ethan's voice was hard. Not yet. Ethan, if we go public now, Kane buries it. He's got enough connections to make this disappear, and Moss will vanish before we can prove anything. Ethan leaned forward. We need more. We need evidence that ties Kane directly to the attack, and we need it fast. How? Claire asked. Ethan looked at her, and she saw the calculation in his eyes. Moss is running, but he's not gone yet. He'll need to cover his tracks, move money, destroy evidence, which means he's going to make mistakes. And you want to catch him making them, Hale said slowly. I want to catch him. I want Kane, and I want everyone who thought they could take me down because I'm in a wheelchair. Ethan's voice was ice. I want them destroyed. Claire should have been scared. She should have told him this was insane, that going after a sitting politician and a man desperate enough to plant bombs was suicide. But instead she heard herself say, What do you need me to do? Ethan's eyes met hers, and something in his expression softened. Stay safe. That's what I need. Not happening. Claire crossed her arms. You just said it yourself. Someone tried to kill us tonight. Plural. I'm already in this. So either you let me help or I do it on my own. Your choice. Hale made a sound that might have been a laugh. She's got a point. Ethan stared at Claire for a long moment. Then he nodded. Fine, but you follow my lead. And if I tell you to run, you run. Understood? Understood? Good. Ethan turned back to Hale. Get me everything we have on Moss's known associates, his bank accounts, his travel history. I want to know where he's going before he gets there. Hale nodded and left the room, already making calls. Claire sank into the chair across from Ethan's desk, exhaustion hitting her like a wave. This is insane. Yeah. We could die. We almost did. Claire looked at him. really looked at him and saw the fear he was trying to hide. Are you okay? Ethan's mask slipped just for a second. No, but I will be. Ethan, I thought I was going to lose you tonight. The words came out raw, unfiltered. When that first bomb went off, all I could think was that you were there because of me, that if something happened to you, it would be my fault. Claire's throat tightened. Nothing happened. But it could have. And it still might. Ethan's hands were shaking now, the adrenaline finally wearing off. You should leave, Claire. Take the money, go somewhere safe, and let me handle this. No. Claire. I said no. She leaned forward. I'm not leaving you. Not now. Not when people are literally trying to kill you. That's exactly why you should leave. And that's exactly why I'm staying. Claire reached across the desk, covering his hand with hers. We're in this together. That's what you said, right? So stop trying to push me away. Ethan stared at her hand on his, and when he looked up, his eyes were wet. Why? Because I care about you, you idiot. The words came out before she could stop them, and Claire felt her face flush. I know that's not part of the contract, and I know this whole thing was supposed to be fake, but somewhere along the way it stopped being fake for me. So yeah, I'm staying. Deal with it. Ethan didn't say anything. He just turned his hand over, lacing his fingers through hers, and held on like she was the only thing keeping him from falling apart. They sat like that for a long time, in the quiet of the office, while the world outside tried to destroy them. The next 72 hours were a blur of strategy, surveillance, and sleepless nights. Hale came through with a mountain of information on Gerald Moss. Travel records showing flights booked to 3 different countries, bank transfers to accounts in the Cayman Islands, and a series of phone calls to a number registered to Victor Kane's campaign office. He's covering his tracks, Hale said, spreading documents across the conference table. But he's doing it sloppily, panicking. Good, Ethan said. Panicked people make mistakes. They'd set up a command center in one of the estate's unused rooms, computers, phones, security feeds. Claire had thrown herself into the work, cross-referencing financial records, tracking communication patterns, piecing together the web of corruption that connected Moss to Kane. And the deeper they dug, the worse it got. Kane wasn't just funding his campaign with stolen money. He was using the Callaway Group as a scapegoat, positioning himself as the politician who would hold corporate America accountable while quietly bleeding them dry from the inside. He's been doing this for years, Claire said, staring at the timeline she'd built. The Callaway Group isn't his first target. There are at least 3 other companies with similar patterns: shell corporations, embezzlement, political leverage. Ethan leaned over her shoulder, studying the screen. Can we prove it? We can prove the money trail, but connecting Kane directly to the bombing? Claire shook her head. That's harder. Moss is the link, but he's not talking. Then we make him talk. Claire turned in her chair. How? Ethan's expression was cold. We give him a reason to. That night, they set the trap. Hale leaked information to one of Moss's known contacts, a message that suggested the Callaway Group had recovered evidence from the gala, evidence that would tie Moss and Kane to the attack. The bait was simple. If Moss wanted to destroy that evidence before it went public, he'd have to come back. He won't fall for it, Claire said, pacing the office. He's not that stupid. He's desperate, Ethan corrected, and desperate people take risks. What if he doesn't come alone? What if Kane sends people? Then we'll be ready. Claire stopped pacing. This is dangerous, Ethan. I know. People could get hurt. I know that too. Ethan rolled his wheelchair closer. But if we don't do this, Kane gets away with it, Moss gets away with it, and they'll come after us again. This is the only way to end it. Claire wanted to argue. She wanted to find another solution, something safer, something that didn't involve baiting a killer back to the estate. But she couldn't think of one. Fine, she said, but I'm staying with you the whole time. Claire, non-negotiable. Ethan looked like he wanted to fight her on it. Then he just nodded. Okay. They waited. Hours passed. Midnight came and went. Claire sat in Ethan's office watching the security feeds, her nerves stretched so thin she thought they might snap. Ethan was at his desk, his phone within reach. Hale positioned in another room with a direct line to private security they'd brought in, people Ethan trusted, people who weren't on the company payroll. Anything? Ethan asked. Claire shook her head. Nothing yet. Then at 2 in the morning, the sensors on the east perimeter tripped. Claire's heart jumped into her throat. Someone's here. Ethan grabbed his phone. Hale, we've got movement. On the screen, Claire watched a figure slip through the trees near the back gate. Dark clothes, moving carefully, avoiding the main cameras. That's him, Ethan said. Claire's hands were shaking. What do we do? We let him think he's winning, then we take him. Moss made it to the house, using a keycard that should have been deactivated weeks ago, another sign that he'd had inside help. He moved through the lower floors, heading toward Ethan's office, and Claire's pulse hammered with every step he took. He's almost here, she whispered. Ethan positioned his wheelchair behind the desk, his expression calm. Stay behind me, no matter what happens. Ethan, promise me. Claire swallowed hard. I promise. The door to the office opened, and Gerald Moss stepped inside. He was in his 50s, graying hair, expensive suit now rumpled and dirty. He looked exhausted, desperate, and when he saw Ethan sitting behind the desk, his face went pale. Hello, Gerald, Ethan said calmly. Moss's hand went to his jacket pocket, and Claire's breath caught. Don't, Ethan said. Whatever you're reaching for, it's not going to help. Moss pulled his hand back, empty. You set me up. You tried to kill me. I'd say we're even. Ethan leaned back in his wheelchair. Where's Kane? I don't know what you're talking about. Wrong answer. Ethan's voice hardened. You've been funneling money to Victor Kane for 2 years. You helped him plant those bombs at the gala, and now you're here because you're scared the evidence we recovered is going to send you both to prison. Moss's face twisted. You don't have evidence. We have everything. Ethan gestured to the files stacked on his desk. Bank records, shell corporations, communication logs. We have you, Gerald. The only question is whether you want to go down alone or if you want to take Kane with you. Moss's hands were shaking. He'll kill me. He's already trying to kill you. You think he's going to let you live after this? You're a liability. Ethan's voice dropped. But if you cooperate, if you give us Kane, I can protect you. New identity, relocation, immunity. You'll never see the inside of a prison cell. Claire held her breath, watching Moss calculate his options. Then slowly Moss nodded. Okay, I'll talk, but I want the deal in writing. You'll get it. Ethan picked up his phone. Hale, bring them in. The doors opened and 3 men in suits stepped inside. FBI agents, Claire realized. Real ones, not private security. Moss's eyes went wide. I contacted them yesterday, Ethan said. Gave them everything we had. They've been waiting for you to confirm it. He looked at the agents. He's all yours. The agents moved forward and Moss didn't resist. He just stood there, his shoulders sagging, as they read him his rights and cuffed his hands behind his back. Victor Kane ordered the attack, Moss said, his voice hollow. He wanted you dead, Ethan. Said you were getting too close, asking too many questions. The bombing was supposed to look like a terrorist attack, random, untraceable. One of the agents wrote it down and Moss kept talking, spilling everything, the money, the plan, Kane's involvement. And Claire watched, her hands finally stopping their shaking, as the man who'd tried to kill them fell apart. When the agents took Moss away, the office fell silent. Ethan sat behind his desk, staring at the space where Moss had been, and Claire could see the exhaustion etched into every line of his face. It's over, she said quietly. Not yet. Ethan looked at her. Kane's still out there, and he's not going to go quietly. The FBI has Moss's testimony. They'll arrest Kane. Maybe. But Kane's smart. He'll have lawyers, connections, ways to fight this. Ethan's jaw tightened. I'm not waiting for the legal system to do its job. I'm going to make sure he pays. Claire crossed the room and knelt beside his wheelchair. How? Ethan pulled out his phone and opened a file. Hale's been putting together a dossier. Every dirty deal Kane's ever made, every company he's destroyed, every lie he's told. We're going to give it to the press. All of it. By tomorrow morning, Victor Kane won't just be facing criminal charges. He'll be facing the court of public opinion. And that'll destroy him. That's the idea. Ethan's eyes met hers. He tried to kill us, Claire. He doesn't get to walk away. Claire thought about the ballroom, the explosions, the fear in Ethan's eyes when he thought she might die. She thought about everything Kane had taken, not just money, but lives, futures, hope. "Do it," she said. Ethan smiled, small, grim, satisfied. "Already done?" "The story goes live in 3 hours." By sunrise, Victor Kane's career was over. The headlines were brutal. Every major outlet ran the story: corruption, embezzlement, conspiracy to commit murder. Kane's face was plastered across every screen, his carefully constructed image crumbling in real time. His campaign suspended operations. His donors pulled funding. His allies distanced themselves so fast it would have been funny if it wasn't so vicious. And by noon, the FBI arrested him. Claire watched the news coverage from the estate's living room, Ethan beside her, and felt something loosen in her chest that had been tight since the gala. "It's really over," she said. "Yeah." Ethan's hand found hers. "It is." They sat there for a long time, watching Kane's empire burn, and Claire realized something that should have scared her but didn't. She didn't want to leave. Not in 10 months. Not ever. She'd signed a contract that said she'd walk away when this was over. But the idea of actually doing it, of going back to her old life, her old apartment, a world where Ethan Calloway wasn't in it, felt impossible. "Ethan," she said quietly. He looked at her. "Yeah? What happens now?" "Now we rebuild. The company, the reputation, all of it." He paused. "And we figure out what we are." Claire's heart hammered. "What do you want us to be?" Ethan turned to face her fully, and the walls he'd kept up since the day they met were gone completely. "I want you to stay," he said. "Not because of the contract, not because of the money. I want you to stay because I love you, and I hope, you love me too." Claire's breath caught. She should have been scared. She should have questioned it, analyzed it, reminded herself that this had started as a transaction and nothing more, but all she felt was sure. "Yeah," she said, her voice breaking. "I do." Ethan pulled her closer, and when he kissed her, it wasn't for cameras or contracts or anyone but them, and for the first time in her life, Claire Bennett felt like she was exactly where she was supposed to be. The days after Victor Kane's arrest should have felt like victory. The news cycle was relentless, every outlet picking apart Kane's corruption, Moss's testimony cementing the case, the FBI building charges that would keep both men locked up for decades. The Calloway Group's stock had stabilized, then climbed. Investors who'd been pulling back were suddenly calling again, eager to get in on the company that had survived an assassination attempt and come out stronger. But Claire couldn't shake the feeling that something was still wrong. She stood in Ethan's office 3 days after Kane's arrest, watching him work through a stack of contracts that needed his signature, and tried to pinpoint what was bothering her. "You're staring," Ethan said without looking up. "I'm thinking." "About?" "About the fact that this feels too easy." Claire crossed to the window, looking out at the estate grounds. Kane's in custody, Moss is cooperating, and suddenly everything's fine after months of people trying to destroy you? Ethan set down his pen. "You don't think it's over, do you?" He was quiet for a moment. Then he shook his head. "No, I don't." "Why not?" "Because Kane didn't work alone. Moss confirmed that much. And the people who backed Kane, the ones who funded his campaign, the ones who stood to gain if the Calloway Group collapsed, they're still out there." Ethan leaned back in his wheelchair. Kane was the face, but he wasn't the brain. Claire's stomach twisted. "So who was?" "I don't know yet, but I'm going to find out." That afternoon, Hale came to the office with news that confirmed Ethan's suspicions. "Kane's lawyers are filing motions to suppress evidence," Hale said, dropping a folder on the desk. "They're claiming entrapment, illegal surveillance, violations of his civil rights. Standard playbook for someone trying to muddy the waters." "Will it work?" Claire asked. "Not with Moss's testimony, but it'll drag things out, months, maybe years." Hale looked at Ethan. "Which gives his backers time to regroup." "Or to come after us again," Ethan said flatly. Hale nodded. "I've increased security. No one gets near the estate without clearance. But if they're determined, they'll find a way." Ethan's jaw tightened. "We need to go on offense. Find out who else is involved before they make their next move." I'm already working on it, Hale said. But it's not going to be fast. These people are good at hiding. Then we need to be better at finding them. After Hale left, Claire sat down across from Ethan, her mind racing. What if we're looking at this wrong? What do you mean? Kane and Moss were focused on the Calloway group, the money, the power, the leverage. But what if that wasn't the endgame? Claire leaned forward. What if destroying you was just one piece of a bigger plan? Ethan frowned. Keep going. Think about it. Kane's campaign was built on taking down corporate corruption. If he could have made you the poster child for everything wrong with big business, he would have won. But he needed you to actually collapse first. So he plants Moss, bleeds the company dry, tries to kill you when you get too close. Claire's pulse quickened as the pieces started falling into place. But if you're gone, who takes over? Ethan's face went very still. My father. And your father's been pushing you out since the accident. He told you himself you had 6 months to prove yourself or he'd call a board vote. Claire stood, pacing. What if Richard's part of this? What if he's been working with Kane to force you out so he can take back control? My father wouldn't... Ethan stopped, his expression darkening. Except he would. He called you weak. He's been undermining you at every turn, and he benefits if you fail. Claire met Ethan's eyes. I'm not saying he planted the bombs, but I am saying he might have known what was coming and let it happen. Ethan's hands clenched into fists. If that's true, if he was involved in any of this, then we need proof before we accuse him. Claire crossed back to the desk. Can we get access to his communications, his financial records? He's careful, always has been. Ethan pulled out his phone. But there's someone who might know where the bodies are buried. Who? My mother. Claire blinked. I didn't know you had a mother. Most people do. Ethan's mouth twisted into something bitter. She and my father divorced when I was 15. She walked away with a settlement and disappeared to Europe. We haven't spoken in years. But she knew Richard. She knew how he operated. She knew everything. Ethan stared at his phone. And if anyone could tell us whether he's capable of this, it's her. So call her. It's not that simple. Why not? Ethan looked up, and Claire saw the old hurt in his eyes. Because the last time I talked to her, she told me I was too much like him, and she couldn't watch me turn into Richard Calloway. Claire's chest tightened. Ethan, I'll call her. He dialed before he could change his mind, and Claire watched his expression harden as the line rang. A woman's voice answered, crisp and polished. Ethan, this is unexpected. Hello, Mother. Ethan's tone was carefully neutral. I need information. No pleasantries, no, how have you been? How have you been? Lonely and rich. Your turn? There was a pause. What kind of information? The kind that tells me whether my father's been conspiring to destroy me. The silence on the other end stretched so long that Claire thought the call had dropped. Then Ethan's mother said, very quietly, What's happened? Ethan told her. The bombs, Kane, Moss, the pattern of attacks. And when he finished, his mother let out a long breath. Richard always did play the long game, she said. But orchestrating an assassination attempt on his own son? That's a new low, even for him. So you think he's capable of it? I think Richard is capable of anything if it means preserving his empire. Another pause. But I don't think he'd risk killing you. Too messy, too much exposure. He'd want you to fail on your own terms, public, humiliating, impossible to come back from. Like a bomb at a gala where I'm the center of attention, Ethan said flatly. No. Like a board vote where you're removed from power and he steps back in as the hero who saved the company. His mother's voice sharpened. If Richard wanted you dead, Ethan, you'd be dead. But if he wanted you gone, he'd let someone else do the dirty work and swoop in to clean up the mess. Claire's stomach dropped. He knew. He knew Kane was going to attack, and he let it happen. Who's that? Ethan's mother asked. Claire, my wife. Ah, the translator. There was a smile in her voice. I read about the wedding, very sudden, very convenient. It's not... Ethan stopped. It started that way. It's not anymore. Good. Richard hated anyone I actually cared about. Nice to know some things change. His mother's tone shifted, becoming businesslike. If you want proof, Look at Richard's offshore accounts. He keeps a set of records in a safety deposit box at First National, box 447. The key's in his office, hidden in the base of that ugly bronze statue he loves. How do you know that? Because I'm the one who set up the accounts 20 years ago, and Richard's too arrogant to change his systems. She paused. Be careful, Ethan. If you go after him, he'll destroy you. He won't hesitate. Neither will I. I know. That's what scares me. His mother's voice softened. For what it's worth, I'm proud of you. You survived something that should have broken you, and you're still fighting. That takes strength Richard never had. Ethan's throat worked. Thank you. Don't thank me. Just win. The line went dead. Ethan sat there for a moment, staring at his phone. Then he looked at Claire. We need to get into that safety deposit box. How? Your father's not just going to hand over the key. No, but he's not here right now. He's at a board meeting downtown. Ethan's eyes were hard, which means the office is empty. Claire felt her pulse quicken. You want to break into his office? I want to get what's mine. There's a difference. Ethan, if he catches us, he won't. Not if we're fast. Ethan rolled toward the door. You coming? Claire should have said no. She should have told him this was insane, that breaking into Richard Calloway's office was a line they couldn't uncross. But she thought about the bombs, the fear, the way Richard had looked at Ethan like he was already dead. Yeah, she said. I'm coming. Richard Calloway's office was on the top floor of the main building, behind a door that required both a key card and a fingerprint scanner. But Ethan had access. He was still technically the heir, still part of the executive team. The office was exactly what Claire expected. Dark wood, leather chairs, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. And in the corner, on a marble pedestal, sat the ugliest bronze statue Claire had ever seen. Some abstract thing that looked like it was trying to be an eagle, but had given up halfway through. That's it, Ethan said, rolling toward the statue. Claire kept watch at the door while Ethan ran his hands over the base of the sculpture, feeling for a hidden compartment. After a moment, something clicked, and a small drawer slid open. Inside was a single key. Got it. Ethan pocketed the key and closed the drawer. Let's go. They made it out of the building without being stopped, and by the time they reached the bank, Claire's nerves were so frayed she thought she might break. The safety deposit box was in the vault, and the bank manager, who recognized Ethan immediately, didn't ask any questions when he presented the key and signed the access log. Inside the box were 3 file folders and a USB drive. Ethan opened the first folder and Claire watched his face go pale. What is it? She asked. Contracts. Between Richard and Kane's campaign, financial support in exchange for regulatory favors. Ethan flipped through the pages, his hands shaking. He's been working with Kane for 5 years, funding him, guiding him, positioning him to take down competitors. Including me. Claire picked up the second folder. Inside were bank statements showing transfers from Richard's offshore accounts to the shell corporation that Moss had been using. Millions of dollars moving through layers of legal protection, all of it designed to look legitimate. He funded the whole thing, Claire said quietly. Kane, Moss, all of it. Your father bankrolled your assassination attempt. Ethan didn't answer. He just stared at the documents like they'd burned him. The USB drive contained emails, hundreds of them. Richard coordinating with Kane, discussing strategy, outlining plans to discredit Ethan and force a board vote. And near the bottom of the files, one email that made Claire's blood run cold. If the accident didn't finish the job, this will. The accident, Claire whispered. Ethan, your car accident, the one that put you in the wheelchair. Ethan's hands were shaking now, the pages slipping from his fingers. The brake lines were cut. We knew that, but we thought it was random. A failed carjacking. We never... His voice broke. He tried to kill me. My own father tried to kill me. Claire grabbed his hand, holding tight. We have proof now. Everything we need to destroy him. He's my father. He tried to murder you. I know. Ethan's voice was hollow. I know. They took the files and left the bank, and by the time they got back to the estate, Ethan's walls were back up. His face was a mask, his voice steady, and Claire knew he was forcing himself to compartmentalize, because if he didn't, he'd fall apart. "We give this to the FBI," he said. "Along with everything else, Kane, Moss, and Richard, all of them." "And the company?" "The board will have to decide, but Richard's done. After this gets out, he'll be lucky if he doesn't spend the rest of his life in prison." Claire wanted to say something comforting. She wanted to tell him it would be okay, that he'd get through this, but she knew better. So she just stayed beside him while he called the FBI, handed over the evidence, and watched his father's empire start to crumble. The fallout was nuclear. Richard Calloway was arrested within 24 hours, charged with conspiracy to commit murder, embezzlement, fraud, and a dozen other counts that would keep him locked up for the rest of his life. The media went insane. The board called an emergency meeting, and the Calloway Group's stock tanked so hard that trading was temporarily suspended. But Ethan didn't flinch. He called the board together, laid out the evidence, and made his case. Richard had betrayed the company, betrayed his son, and nearly destroyed everything the Calloway name stood for. But Ethan was still standing, and he was ready to rebuild. The vote was unanimous. Ethan was named CEO, effective immediately. Claire watched from the back of the boardroom as Ethan accepted the role, his voice steady, his shoulders straight, and she felt something shift in her chest. Pride, maybe, or relief that he'd finally gotten what he'd been fighting for. But there was still one more problem. Vanessa Hart. She showed up at the estate 2 days after Richard's arrest, her face pale, her hands shaking. "I need to talk to Ethan," she said when Claire answered the door. "He's not interested." "Please." Vanessa's voice cracked. "I know I don't deserve it, but I need to explain." Claire should have slammed the door in her face. But something in Vanessa's expression, genuine fear maybe, or desperation, made her hesitate. "Wait here," Claire said. She found Ethan in his office, reviewing the company's restructuring plan, and told him Vanessa was at the door. "Tell her to leave," he said without looking up. "She's scared, Ethan, really scared." "Good, she should be. Just hear her out. 5 minutes, then she's gone." Ethan finally looked up, his expression hard. "Why do you care?" "Because I want to know what she knows. And I think she's finally ready to talk." Ethan stared at her for a long moment, then he nodded. "Fine. 5 minutes." They met in the library, Vanessa sitting across from Ethan and Claire, her hands clasped in her lap. "I didn't know," she said immediately. "About Kane, about your father, about any of it. You have to believe me." "I don't have to believe anything," Ethan said flatly. "Richard came to me after the accident. He told me you were going to drag the company down, that you were too damaged to lead. He said if I stayed with you, I'd go down too." Vanessa's voice shook. "I believed him. I thought I was protecting myself, but I didn't know he was trying to kill you." "And the interview?" Claire asked. "The one where you played the victim?" "That was me being stupid and scared. I thought if I could control the narrative, people would stop asking questions. But then Kane was arrested, and I realized—" Vanessa looked at Ethan, her eyes wet. "I realized Richard used me, just like he used everyone else." Ethan's expression didn't change. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because the FBI contacted me. They want me to testify against Richard, and I will. I'll tell them everything." Vanessa took a shaky breath. "I'm not asking for forgiveness, Ethan. I just wanted you to know that I'm sorry, for all of it." Ethan was silent for a long time. Then he said, "Testify. Help them put Richard away. And then stay out of my life." Vanessa nodded, tears streaming down her face. "Okay." She left without another word, and Claire watched her go, feeling something close to pity. "You believe her?" Ethan asked. "I think she's telling the truth. Doesn't mean I forgive her. Neither do I." Ethan's jaw tightened. "But if her testimony helps bury my father, I'll take it." 3 months later, Richard Calloway, Victor Kane, and Gerald Moss were all convicted on multiple charges. Richard got 30 years. Kane got 25. Moss got 15 in exchange for his cooperation. The Calloway Group stabilized, then thrived. Ethan restructured the board, brought in new leadership, and turned the company into something cleaner, stronger, more transparent. Investors came back. The stock climbed. And slowly, the Calloway name stopped being synonymous with scandal and started meaning something worth respecting again. And Claire was there for all of it. She'd started her own consulting firm, helping companies navigate cross-cultural negotiations, using her skills to build bridges instead of just translating words. The work was challenging, fulfilling, and entirely hers. But she still came home to Ethan every night. The contract had expired months ago. The year was up, the money had been paid, and technically, Claire could have walked away. But she didn't. Because somewhere between the fake marriage and the real danger, between the quiet mornings in the kitchen and the nights when they'd almost died, Claire had fallen in love with Ethan Calloway. And he'd fallen in love with her. They didn't talk about it much. They didn't need to. It was there in the way Ethan reached for her hand when he was stressed, in the way Claire stayed up late helping him prep for board meetings, in the way they'd built a life together that felt nothing like a contract and everything like a choice. But there was still one thing left unsaid. Claire was in the garden, watching the sunset, when Ethan found her. He rolled up beside her, and she saw immediately that something was different. He looked nervous, which was rare. Ethan Calloway didn't get nervous. "Hey," she said. "You okay?" "Yeah, I just—" He stopped, taking a breath. "I need to ask you something." Claire turned to face him fully, her heart starting to race. "Okay." Ethan reached into his pocket and pulled out a small box. He opened it, and inside was a ring, simple, elegant, nothing like the ostentatious diamond Vanessa had worn. "The first time I asked you to marry me, it was a business deal," Ethan said quietly. "A contract, a transaction, and you said yes because you needed the money." Claire's throat tightened, "But this time," Ethan continued, "I'm asking because I love you, because you saved my life, my company, and my sanity, because I can't imagine a future without you in it." He met her eyes. "So, Claire Bennett, will you marry me? For real this time?" Claire's vision blurred, and she realized she was crying. "Yes," she said, her voice breaking. "Yes, you idiot. Of course I'll marry you." Ethan pulled her down into his lap, and she kissed him, tasting salt and relief and a future that was finally, completely, theirs. The second wedding was nothing like the first. This time there were guests, real ones. Claire's father walking her down the aisle with tears in his eyes. Marcus Hale standing as Ethan's best man. Friends, colleagues, people who actually cared about them instead of just showing up for appearances. And when the officiant asked if they took each other, when Claire and Ethan said their vows in front of people who mattered, it felt like the world had finally stopped trying to tear them apart. At the reception, Ethan actually stood, with the help of braces and months of physical therapy that had slowly brought back some mobility, and raised a glass. "A year ago, I was a man who'd lost everything," he said, his voice carrying across the room. "My body, my fiancée, my company, my future. I was sitting in a wheelchair, surrounded by enemies, and I thought I was done." He looked at Claire, and his expression softened. "And then this woman walked into my life. She didn't pity me. She didn't try to fix me. She just stood beside me and refused to let me fall. She challenged me, she pushed me, she saved me in every way that mattered." Ethan's voice roughened. "Claire Calloway, you are the strongest, smartest, most stubborn person I've ever met, and I'm the luckiest man alive because you chose to stay." The room erupted in applause, and Claire felt her face flush as Ethan sat back down and pulled her close. "I love you," he whispered. "I love you too," she whispered back. And as the night stretched on, filled with laughter and music and people who'd fought beside them, Claire realized something that made her chest ache in the best way. She'd come here looking for money, for survival, for a way to save her father and keep her head above water. But she'd found something infinitely more valuable. She'd found home. Years later, Claire stood in the lobby of the Calloway Group headquarters, watching workers install a plaque near the entrance. The Calloway Foundation, established 2028. Supporting education, healthcare, and opportunity for those who need it most. Ethan rolled up beside her, reading the plaque over her shoulder. "You think it's too much?" "I think it's perfect." Claire turned to face him. "Your father built an empire by taking from people. You're building one by giving back. That's the difference." "We're building one," Ethan corrected. "This foundation was your idea. And you made it happen." "We made it happen." Ethan reached for her hand. "That's how this works, remember? We're a team." Claire smiled. "Yeah, we are." They stood there together in the building that had almost been Ethan's tomb and watched people walk past, employees, clients, kids from the scholarship program the foundation had started, people whose lives were better because Ethan and Claire had refused to let the darkness win. And Claire thought about the woman she'd been a few years ago, drowning in debt, desperate for a lifeline, willing to fake a marriage just to survive. She'd thought she was selling herself, trading her dignity for a paycheck. But she'd been wrong. She hadn't sold anything. She'd invested in something real, something worth fighting for. And the returns had been immeasurable. That night, back at the estate, Claire found Ethan in the library, reading through reports for the foundation's next project. "You're going to work yourself to death," she said, leaning against the doorframe. "Says the woman who scheduled 4 meetings before breakfast tomorrow." "Fair point." Well, Claire crossed the room and sat down beside him. "We're good at this, aren't we? The whole changing the world thing." "We're getting there." Ethan set down the report. "You ever regret it? Saying yes to that first contract?" Claire thought about it. The fear, the uncertainty, the nights when she'd wondered if she'd made a terrible mistake. "No," she said finally. "I don't regret it, because it brought me here. To you." Ethan pulled her closer, and she rested her head on his shoulder, feeling the steady beat of his heart. "I used to think I needed to be whole to deserve love," Ethan said quietly. "That the accident made me less than I was. That no one would choose me if they had other options. And now? Now I know that's bullshit." He kissed the top of her head. "You chose me. Not because you had to. Not because I paid you. You chose me because you saw something worth staying for. And that's more than I ever thought I'd get." Claire's throat tightened. "You know what I saw?" "What?" "A man who refused to quit, who got knocked down and got back up, who turned pain into power and built something better from the wreckage." She looked up at him. "I saw you, Ethan, the real you, and that was enough." Ethan's eyes were wet, and he didn't bother hiding it. "I love you. I love you too." They sat there in the quiet library, wrapped in each other, and Claire knew with absolute certainty that this was it. This was the life she was supposed to live. Not the one she'd planned, not the safe, small existence she'd been settling for. This. The messy, complicated, beautiful life she'd built with a man who'd been broken and put himself back together. Who'd faced down assassins and corrupt politicians and his own father, and come out stronger. This was worth every risk she'd taken, every moment of fear, every second of doubt. Because in the end, Claire Bennett had walked into a contract marriage with nothing to lose and everything to gain, and she'd walked out with a partner, a purpose, and a love that would last the rest of her life. The empire had been saved, the enemies had been defeated, and Claire and Ethan Calloway stood together, unbroken, unbowed, and ready for whatever came next. Because that's what they did. They survived, they fought, and they won. Together.